Calvin said, I enjoy Joel Klatt's perspective. There's a headline. I found myself saying that a time or two, Calvin. He said, I like Klatt's perspective, including his recent take on the 5+11 model. However, while I mostly agree, his intensity made me wonder. So Klatt, merit-based points, but he's too intense. Calvin says, is his frustration genuinely about propaganda, or is it influenced by Fox's stake in pushing the Big Ten-backed model? Ooh, Fox. Yuck. So, hey, I don't think he is. I mean, many of you have sent the clip of Joel Klatt talking about his beefs with the college football playoff conundrum that we're in right now. Namely, which format are we going to go with? So much so that I watched it. Not only did I watch it, I said, hold on a second. I've never agreed with Klatt on the playoff. And all of a sudden, you can't even tell the difference between him and me, at least on this topic. It's refreshing. For once in my life, I find myself listening to Klatt on playoff-related matters, saying, he's right. He's right. I can't even pick apart anything he's talking about. We are in lockstep on this. So I got to tell you, Calvin, if you are suspicious about Joel Klatt's motivation and you think it may be Fox-related, well, okay, I don't think it is, but let's just say it is. Argument's sake, let's say it is. Well, I don't work for Fox. I've never been employed by Fox a day in my life. I didn't even work for a Fox local affiliate when I was in the local news game. So I got no affiliation with Fox. Well, I feel the same way Klatt does. So I can't believe people are missing this. I know it sounds a little conceited, a little arrogant to talk that way. I just fully believe there is an obvious one, and then there's an obvious distant second when it comes to the philosophies of the approaches we should be taking in format right now. And I know a lot of you have been tuned in day to day in the weeds of this, but some of you maybe just checking back in. Some of you may be NBA fans. You've been watching the finals, or you've been living your lives and you're taking your kids on vacation or whatever, and you just haven't been locked into the day-to-day goings-on in college football playoff circles. So what we've been debating, not we, what conferences have been debating is beyond 2025, 2026 and beyond, what's the world going to look like? What's the format going to look like? And you've recently had the emergence of the concept of the AQ model. That's the one for future's sake. When I say AQ model, that's the one where the SEC and the Big Ten know they're getting 4 teams into the playoff. And the ACC and the Big 12 know they're getting 2 teams into the playoff. And then you've got the G5 spot. Now I, and apparently Klatt as well, I am advocating hardcore for 14 teams over 16 teams if we go the AQ route. So if we were to do that, it would be 4-4-2-2-1-1. And there's no at-large spot. If Notre Dame makes the playoff, there's no at-large spot. Now there's reason behind that, which I'll get to in a second. Okay, so that's one school of thought. And then kind of dovetailing off that, there's a group that wants the AQ model in a 16-team field. Only difference there is you'd have a few at-large spots on top of the same general format. But then there is a group of people who say that's evil. It is counterintuitive. It's antithetical to what the spirit of college football and sports should be about. You should never enter a season knowing that a conference has a certain amount of, just delegated spots in the playoff. By the way, up until this year, I would have wholeheartedly agreed with you, but that's back when we had smaller playoff fields. Now we've gone to 14 or 16, which means you've got to invert the paradigm. You got to invert the dynamic of thinking on this thing entirely. But that kind of person looks at it and says no to AQs, no, full stop. No, it's a non-starter. They either want just 16 of the best teams or 14 of the best teams, or there's been this, some would call it a compromise, I just call it idiocy, where you go the 5+11 model. And that would be take your conference champs, and then you've got like 11 at-larges. So you got your 4 conference champs, and then you got the G5 spot, so those are your guaranteed 5. And then after that, you just take the next 11 best teams. So, apparently Klatt doesn't like that. Put out a lot of videos last week. I listened to him, and I just pounded my fist on the table, man. I completely agree with him. He's right about all of it. So I didn't hear a single thing he said that I disagreed with. But there was this thing where he was talking about, and you notice Calvin said propaganda. He said, Joel Klatt's talking about propaganda. I mean, is that really his motivation, or does he just want to prop up the Big Ten? Look, nefarious motivations or not, just ignore that for a second. I don't think you're right about it, but even if you are, I'm sitting over here and I'm thinking, okay, get through let's just brush all the weeds to the side. Sling blade them. I used to have to sling blade the ditch when I was a kid. It sucked. But you know what? It made the ditch look a lot neater and tidier and cleaner. And we need to sling blade the ditch in college football. Too much in the weeds right now. Too much questioning of one's motivation. Hey, look, I don't care if I probably would care if Satan himself entered the conversation, okay? I'm going to be real. I would prefer that he abstain, but even if he were to enter the equation, Satan, if he were to propose a college football playoff model, could have some merit to it, even if there is nothing else redeemable about him and his character. And shame on us for ever having to resort to, soliciting the opinion of the Dark One on this. But point being, no matter what someone's motivation is, ask yourself this. This is my advice for you, Calvin and anyone else. What do you want? What do you want? What do you care about? Forget about the models. I think we've gotten really twisted on sort of reverse engineering the process here. And by that, I mean a lot of people are talking about college football playoff formatting and expansion by starting with the format. That should not be how the conversation works, by the way. It's what a lot of people have been tricked into doing. Forget about the format for a second. This is advice from me and from me to you. Hey, quick time out. Check and see if you're subscribed to the channel. If you're not, make sure you do. It's free. It doesn't obligate you or sign you up for anything. It just helps us keep the channel free. All right, back to the show. Ask yourself, be selfish. Be selfish for a second, Calvin. Ask yourself, what do you love about college football? Okay, then get down to the nuts and bolts of what do you want in a playoff model? What do you want that playoff model to accomplish? What do you want crystallized in the sport? So I can tell you what my feeling on this is. And the only reason I'm going to get selfish myself here is because I know you guys, and I know most of you will agree with what I'm about to say. And that's even as we disagree, allegedly, on what the playoffs should be. So I'm going to tell you what I want. Forgetting about the formats for a second. What I want is, number one, maximum urgency on every regular season game. I want every one of them to feel do or die, no safety net under it. If you lose, there's a chance instead of falling nice and safe into a net, you just crash and burn in your street pizza on the sidewalk. That's what college football's always been up until 10 minutes ago, and it's what I would always love it to be. So the first thing I want is maximum urgency on regular season games. Do you agree with me? If yes, let's continue. I want maximum emphasis on conference races. I want the Big Ten championship race and the ACC championship race to carry maximum meaning, okay, independent of anything else, because that's the way it's always been. And unlike some people who would tell you, well, hey, man, everything's got to change. Everything doesn't have to change. The good stuff shouldn't change. Change the bad stuff. All right, change the bad stuff. Keep the good stuff free of interference. This is part of the good stuff. No, the regular season being the most important regular season in all of sports, that's a good thing that college football had. So we don't need progress there. Or we don't need change masquerading as progress there. Leave it alone. And leave conference races alone. And leave the impact and importance of them alone. So that's how I feel about that. And then the third, and I've heard a lot of you say this, ironically, those of you pushing against the AQ model have said your reason for pushing back on it is you want teams to have to earn it on the field. Well, so do I. Hey, catch me here. That's why I'm supporting the AQ model. How could that be? What? Are you crazy? That doesn't make any sense. It makes perfect sense. You've just had the well poisoned. I think, quite frankly, the people who support the AQ model have done a very poor job of explaining the AQ model, okay? So right now, people look at the AQ model, the concept of the AQ model, and it's a non-starter for them. Why? Well, you should never have a format that guarantees SEC teams are going to have 4 in and Big Ten teams are going to have 4 in. It doesn't guarantee that. It guarantees the conferences are going to have 4 apiece in. It doesn't guarantee any team anything. People are so caught up on that, what it guarantees a conference, that they're not realizing individual teams aren't guaranteed anything. And to put rubber to road here, I want to take you to a hypothetical. Let's just take the University of Tennessee. I picked them out of the blue earlier today, but I looked at their schedule, And I said, Jesse, find me Tennessee's schedule, okay? So let's say Tennessee going into mid-November this year is 9-1. That means they've probably beaten Georgia or Alabama. They've beaten Syracuse. They've beaten Oklahoma, let's say. Let's say they're 9-1, all right? They got 2 games left. Remember, most of us just agreed we want urgency on every regular season game. We want maximum importance on conference races, and we want teams to earn a playoff spot on the field. That's what most of us just agreed on, right? All right, let's say Tennessee's 9-1 at this point in the season. In your 5+11 model, where you suggest to me you got to earn it on the field and where you suggest to me that regular season games matter, Tennessee doesn't have to win another game. Do you realize that? Tennessee, as of November 22nd, 2 games to go in the season, both of them conference games, they're looking at it and saying, we'd love to win both of them. And there would be benefit to us winning them, but we're playing for seeding right now. We know from mid-November on we're in. Do you understand in the AQ model, where people are so worked up about what the SEC is guaranteed, the teams in the SEC aren't guaranteed anything. Tennessee, if they were 9-1 in mid-November, would probably be in the top 5. You'd have an SEC team in the top 5 that in mid-November is guaranteed nothing. In the format I'm endorsing, at least, they're guaranteed nothing. They go to Florida and lose, they probably drop out of contention for the conference title game, which means from that point on, the best they can hope for is to be active in that play-in Saturday. And so they drop, let's say they go 9-2, and then they beat Vanderbilt. Let's say they go 10-2. What they're probably doing at that point, first Saturday in December, is they're hosting a play-in game at Neyland. South Carolina's going to Neyland. 6 versus 3 or 5 versus 4. But the bottom line is Tennessee knows nothing about what they're guaranteed in that format. In fact, hardly any teams know, even in the Big Ten and the SEC, if you go the AQ model, that they're guaranteed anything. The only guarantee you have, and the only guarantee you should have, is if you're playing in your conference championship game in the SEC or the Big Ten, you know you're going to go to the playoff. That's it. That means as late as the end of November, the number 3 team in the SEC might not make the playoff. The number 3 team in the Big Ten might not make the playoff. You please, someone who is intellectually superior to me, explain how the 5+11 further emphasizes conference races and places more urgency on regular season games than what I just pitched to you. You're so caught up on the conference being guaranteed something. You're so bent out of shape about that. You don't understand that individual teams aren't guaranteed anything. And everything you just claim to care about, whether it's urgency on regular season games, importance on conference races, earning your way into the playoff, all 3 of those boxes get checked with the AQ model. Hardly any of them get checked with the 5+11 model. And any of you out there who are basically pushing back on one of these formats despite the SEC, you probably need to know that the SEC has both of these hands clasped together as tight as they can, and they are praying in Birmingham. People are dumb enough to fall for the to fall for the 5+11. Last year, Jesse, actually, I told you to show me this later, but do me a favor, pull up what the rankings looked like going into Conference Championship Saturday last year. Okay, let me just remind you of something. Last year, would we agree it was a slightly down year for the SEC? I think we would mostly agree. Even the SEC homers, of which I am certainly not one, but even the SEC homers out there, I think we mostly agree last year's a down year for the SEC, right? 5+11 model lands 6 SEC teams into the playoff. I need you to understand what you're supporting here. All right, 6, half a dozen SEC teams in a down year are in the postseason if you go the 5+11 route. And not only that, you got Alabama losing that Oklahoma game in humiliating fashion. Nobody cares. They're in. They're hosting. I mean, they're not hosting, but they're solidly in to the playoff. Solidly in there. Ole Miss went and got smoked by Florida. I mean, it should have been a do-or-die game. Got beat by Florida. Lost to Kentucky at home early on. Doesn't matter. They're in. Doesn't matter. Oh, by the way, because you're going 5+11, instead of just the pre-selected number of teams, which loosely correlates to power of conference over an extended period of time, because you're against the AQ model, forget you, Iowa State. Forget you, Brigham Young. Look at BYU. They're the 10-2 last year in the Big 12. Don't care. We got no place for you. We got no place for you, ironically, because we want fairness. You know, we want teams to earn it in, and the stupidity. I agree with Cloud on this, too. I heard him say this. The stupidity of very smart people in the Big 12 is mind-boggling to me right now. That league put out a statement at a time where they should be as selfish as possible, because everyone else is. The Big 12 chose the worst time imaginable to be selfless. They're supporting the 5+11 model, which will screw them every single year, and it will prop up the SEC and or the Big Ten every single year. It will further put a stranglehold on the power and balance thereof in the sport into those Power 2 conferences, more so than it ever has been before. They sat there and said, you know what, we're supporting the 5+11 because we're advocating for the greater good of the sport, even if it's to our detriment. First off, this is the one time you need to be selfish. Secondly, 5+11 is not for the greater good of the sport. It's the opposite. And thirdly, I don't know what thirdly is. I truly, truly think there is a gross misunderstanding and a miscalculation. I think it's as simple as improper labels. I really think it's as simple as using a different phrase other than automatic qualifier. If you just change the language of it, you've got to change the presentation of the concept. Because outside of that, we're talking about something here in the AQ format that checks almost every box that every hardcore fan of college football and secondary and tertiary fan of college football enjoys. So we had a couple of tweets. I wanted to get to them because I had a couple of replies from you guys. Someone hit me from Breezy Point, Minnesota. Beautiful people, beautiful town up there. And they said, I think you like the 4-4-2-2-1-1 model because of the emphasis on conference races. Some people, though, at Juck on Buck specifically, that's our buddy Justin, does a great job. I would highly encourage you guys to watch his show. But he had pointed out on his show, yeah, if you put all this emphasis on conference races and you're deciding that play-in weekend based on conference standings, that's all well and good. But what happens with out-of-conference games? How do you preserve their importance? Great question. Pretty simple. The way I would determine your top 6 in your SEC or Big Ten standings would not simply be the conference standings. I would form subcommittees, and as we're devaluing the role that the College Football Playoff Committee holds over the sport, I would love subcommittees in the Big Ten, subcommittee in the SEC, and what I would love for that committee to do is decide what their 1 through 6 is at the end of the regular season. It doesn't just have to be your straight 1 through 6 conference standings. Now, that accomplishes 2 goals. Number 1, it means you better play your tail off in your out-of-conference games and schedule up in your out-of-conference. And then number 2, it guarantees that with how big these conferences are, if there's a schedule that is vastly inferior to another schedule, you've got a committee that can take that into account. These conferences are so big, the principle that you aren't always what your record says you are even applies within conferences, team to team and schedule to schedule. So that's one thing I wanted to hit because I didn't talk about that the other night, but it's a great point. You want to maximize every part of the regular season, not just conference races. And it's easy to do. You just have to be very creative with how you seed your conference standings. It doesn't just have to be strictly by league standings as it relates to your play-in weekend. We had another one, and I got a lot of this. Jim from Dublin, he said, my brother says he'd be fine with the 4 conference champs making the playoffs. That's it. I think it's dumb. How do you feel about it? Well, of course it's dumb, but it's also unreasonable. Like, it's unrealistic. So, Jim's brother, if you're listening, there's also been a lot of, Josh, why are you advocating for so many teams in the playoff? Why can't we go back to 8 or 6? Friends, if there was an option to do that, I wouldn't be wasting time with this nonsense. Because anyone who's watched this show or listened to this show for any length of time knows I'm the last one who wanted to expand past 4. I'd love to go back to the BCS days. And for anyone who says that damages my credibility, what's your alternative? What we have now? So anyway, I didn't want to expand it, period. But there's a lot of unrealistic proposals out there. Oh, let's go back to 6. Well, you can't because the necessary parties needed to sign off on it wouldn't sign off on it. Same with 8. I was talking to Dellinger the other day, who's been doing the best reporting on this. I said, hey, just out of curiosity, what happens if they don't arrive at any kind of consensus? Like, what happens if these imaginary deadlines approach and then they're here and then they pass and no one's agreed on anything? He's kind of the same way as me. I don't really know what happens. I guess we just stick with the 12-team model. I don't know. But what are we asking for? There's a lot of frustration. There should be. It's a very important matter. It's a very important topic. But what do you want? More so than aligning yours, kind of like in politics, like your team red or team blue, it's probably smarter to define who you are, what your values are, and then decide where you're going to vote. Well, in college football, what do you care about? Then and only then, after you define that, should you decide which format or which model, best accomplishes that. I truly think a lot of people who are opposed to the AQ model, in theory, if you break down what it accomplishes versus what the 5+11 or what the straight seeding accomplishes, you'd probably change your mind. I just need you to understand, if we're going to a playoff field as big as 14 or 16 teams, you are entering the season as a top 7 caliber program where you got a lot of talent, you got the best coaching staffs. You're entering the season knowing we lose a quarter of our games, who cares? Some of us may even be able to lose a third of our games. There's an outside shot. If you play a tough schedule, by whose metrics, I don't know, you can lose 4 games and get into this thing. That's not a safety net. That's like 5 safety nets that you're building under yourself relative to where the sport was not too long ago and where it always should be. So